Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Diverse Thinking, Different Learning podcast. I am so happy to have you joining me today. As a parent, I have navigated both public and private school systems for my children, and we've had wonderful experiences in both. We chose a public school with an incredible language immersion program that featured 2 teachers per class, and it had an incredibly supportive parent community. However, I'm well aware that not everyone has had such a positive experience in public schools. And that's why today's episode is particularly important. We're diving into the independent school option for students who think and learn differently. And my guest today is someone with a wealth of experience and insight on the topic. For more than 20 years, Collette Bowers Zinn has been dedicated to bringing impact and humanity to the work of connecting children with high caliber education. Her unique professional experiences, both as a litigator and a 4th-generation educator, have deeply informed her passion to serve and guide students, families, teachers, and school leadership. Join me in welcoming Collette to the podcast.
Millions of kids struggle with learning, processing, and social-emotional difficulties. These challenges interfere with their ability to reach their full potential. Dr. Karen Wilson is here to help. Her extensive background in pediatric neuropsychology and higher education have prepared her for this unique mission. Listen as she delivers content to inform, educate, and empower parents and educators. This will enable you to identify challenges that kids face and get them on the road to achieving their full potential. This is Diverse Thinking, Different Learning by Child Nexus.
Hi, Collette. Welcome to the podcast.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
I'm so glad you're here. I feel like this conversation is way overdue.
Indeed.
Yes. I've been communicating via email for well over a year now. And I know that I've wanted to have this conversation with you for the podcast for a while. I'm glad we were finally able to make it happen. So thank you again.
Thank you for having me.
And so we're talking about the independent school option today. You do a lot of work with families who are seeking admission to independent schools, considering independent schools as an option for them. What are some of the primary reasons parents might consider independent schools for their children?
The primary reason in my book is that our public schools are currently failing our kids, in particular our kids of color, at astronomical rates. I'm a product of private schools. My kids are in private schools, and I take no joy in paying private school tuition annually. But as far as I'm concerned, I see it as the only current option for my 2 kids of color because of the rates at which public schools are failing our kids, especially our kids of color.
And do you have any insights into kind of where the gaps are? And are there particular areas where they're not getting the attention that they need or the support that they need?
I'd say across the board, In addition to that public school piece, I'm sorry, to take you back to your initial question, there's lots of things to consider with private schools. Class size, much smaller. Whether you want to or not, you're seen in private schools in a way that it's just simply not logistically possible in a lot of our public schools because of class size, caseload for teachers, etc. Just the freedom to not teach to a test or 2 tests, plural. The ability to take the state standards and build on them in creative and connective ways is a luxury that private schools have, that public schools don't necessarily have because they have to teach to the test, adhere to governmental regulations, right? And adhere to a very set curriculum. And so the ability to engage with creative curriculum, small class sizes, smaller communities, more hands-on learning, more project-based learning are all reasons why I think that folks should consider private schools. And what I will say in addition to that is the easy first response is, well, not everyone has access to private schools and can afford them. And that's a myth. That is actually a myth. Private schools are out there. They are accessible. They can be affordable with financial aid for those that need it. And there are access organizations, one of which is mine, Private School Access, AXIS, that help families, in this case, families of color, learn about, apply to, and thrive in private schools. It is possible.
It is possible. I think that many parents who might be listening might have thought that it is not possible. And so I think it's a relief for them to hear that, it is an option that they can consider. And because of the advantages that you recommended, or that you mentioned rather, the smaller class size, the opportunity to explore, things outside of a general or traditional curriculum that may not be available to them in a public school. Are there any disadvantages or circumstances where, an independent school is not a good option for a child?
Absolutely. So we can sit here and talk about the problems with public school all day. We can sit here and talk about problems that arise in private schools all day as well. At the end of the day, it comes down to what's the best match for you and your family. But absolutely, in private schools, oftentimes can be very highly competitive, which then leads to social and emotional distress. They're often predominantly white institutions, which lead to issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Let's not pretend that there aren't issues of socioeconomics associated with private schools. And the list could go on and on and on. What I will say is that no system reigns supreme in perfection. And that, quite frankly, between both our public and private school systems currently, something's got to give, right? The way that public schools are performing and not meeting the needs of our kids, the costs of private school, and all of the, we've got local schools, local high schools in Los Angeles, private schools, annual tuition, $57,000. $57,000. Now, that's accessible to a range of socioeconomically challenged folks because of financial aid. But you also have to ask the question, who can pay $57,000 post-tax off the top, right? So there's arguments on both sides. But at the end of the day, for me, as a Black woman raising Black children, private school, in my mind, is the only option for them with the current circumstances. And I'm very well aware of the fact that that is a privileged stance to be able to take.
Right.
And those that don't have access to said privilege do still have access to quality educations in private schools.
Right.
It is possible.
Right. And I think one of the things you said that's so important is that you really have to find the right match for your child, right? In terms of the school, the culture, the attention they're going to get, the experience that they're going to get. And then we also know how important a sense of belonging is and feeling that you matter in a school environment and how that can play a role in a child's ability to access a curriculum, to be motivated to learn, and how that social environment is such a big factor as well in terms of a child's learning experience.
And it goes beyond that. It's the student and their experience, but it's also equally the family and their experience. To properly support a child in their learning journey, the family or whomever is in support of that student have to be in partnership with whichever educational institution you choose. And that is of utter importance that not only are you taking a look at, is this the right environment for our student, but is this the right environment for our support network as well.
Right. And for a family, I'm thinking about the families that I work with. Many have learning challenges, struggles with processing information. For a family who has a child who, for example, struggles with focus or experiences anxiety in a large, loud classroom, obviously having a smaller class size and more teacher attention is very attractive. Are there things that families with neurodivergent children should consider when evaluating whether an independent school will meet their needs?
I always talk to families about the fact that the process of exploring any educational institution for your student and family is about interviewing them and their community as much as it is about them interviewing you and your family. And so for everyone, but especially families with neurodiverse children, you've got to ask all of your questions. And then you have to let your intuition guide you with the answers that you receive. What do I mean by that? I mean that you don't just go to a meeting, ask your questions, go home and make a decision. You go to a meeting, you ask your questions, you get some answers, and then you tour the facility and see if what they said they're doing is what you're actually seeing them do, right? A lot of, this is America, this is capitalism. People always want to sell. So they're going to tell you what you want to hear. The question is the lived experience a match to what they are selling? And so you got to go prepared. You have to have done your research. If your child needs accommodations, you have to have that list ready when you're interviewing and say, hey, this is what my child needs. Can your institution meet those needs? And allow for people to give you really honest answers. Do your due diligence. Talk to other families in the community. Ask them, hey, my child needs A, B, and C. Have you seen that happening in your community with your child? Have you had to ask? And hey, when something went a little sideways, not according to plan, how did the school handle? How did you handle? How did you both handle in partnership? It's a really active process. And you got to get in there and you have to advocate for yourself, ask all your questions, do your due diligence, and you have to be connected with your intuition to guide at the end of the day what would ultimately work for you and your student.
And I'm so glad that you mentioned asking those questions and having your list ready, because I think for many parents, they don't want to disclose because they feel like if the school knows that my child has ADHD, has autism, is dyslexic, that they're going to use that as an exclusion criteria and not admit them because they don't feel that they can serve them.
And if that is an institution that would use that information to exclude them,
then they shouldn't be going there.
Then that is not where you should be. And that is absolutely why you must disclose and ask all your questions. Also because as human beings, no one likes the bait and switch. Okay, you're not going to be in good standing in a community if you present no neurodiversity, show up, and then announce there's neurodiversity and we need these things. No one likes a bait and switch. A much preferred method is here's who we are, here's what we're working with, and a school with full information, full transparency saying, welcome, we'd love to partner with you. It's very different energy than the other way around.
Right. Absolutely. And for the parents, then they don't feel like they're hiding something. And, it just makes everyone on both sides feel good about this partnership because that's what it really is.
Exactly. And the only way to figure out the fruitfulness of any partnership is to be transparent and forthcoming.
Right. Because ultimately you want your child to thrive in that environment, and you won't know whether that school is equipped to help your child thrive if you don't ensure that they're going to be able to meet your child's needs.
100%. Sitting here processing this with you, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is just like dating, right? Who wants to start the relationship off with a foundation of lies? Where can it go from there, right? And how can you have a fruitful relationship if you're not being fully transparent and stating your needs? How is the other person, how is the school supposed to ever be able to meet them and partner with you to navigate them?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that analogy because I think it's really helpful in terms of people thinking about how to approach this process. And, one of the things I'm thinking about too is, when parents are going through this journey and they're exploring school options, are there things that they should do that are helpful in helping them to assess whether a school's environment and resources will support their child's needs? I'm thinking of what you said about, that school is a business, particularly independent schools. And so they're going to put their best foot forward. They're going to show you all the great things about their school. But how do you know? How can you dig a little deeper to figure out whether or not this school is going to meet your child's needs?
Sure. It's a culmination of things that some of which I've already shared. Get there. Well, let's start at ground zero. Do your research.
Yes.
Right. And I'm not saying go to the homepage of their website. Really dig, right?
Okay.
Look around. What is their mission statement? Do they have a diversity, equity, and inclusion mission statement? Do they have, if you have a neurodivergent student, do they have a page on the website dedicated to learning support? Do your due diligence. Formulate intelligent, well-researched questions that you legitimately have with regard to you, your student, the school, the community. Show up. Go to all the opportunities that you can to get on these campuses. They offer coffees, open houses, meetings with heads of school, presidents, etc. Show up. Get a temperature for community. Get a temperature for the people that would be in your student's life if you went to this school. Let your intuition lead. Separate out ego and what you think your child has to have in terms of name, size, structure, and just go and see and let your intuition say, oh, this would work for my child. Get in there. Like I said, ask all your questions, do all your research. Reach out to people that are already in the community. And if you need help with that, there are consultants, there are access organizations. Hell, if you ask the admissions folks, hey, we'd like to be connected with some other families of color, of neurodivergent learners, of same-sex parent households, whatever your case may be, ask those admissions officers to connect you with current families in their school or recent graduate families from their school to talk to. They're very amicable people. At the end of the day, the goal is the same for both you as the applicant and the admissions folks to make the best match. So they are open books and will connect you with people in their community so that you can do a deeper dive and learn more.
And I think that's something that maybe a lot of parents were not considering. Maybe they've thought about the open houses and the coffee chats and touring the campus, obviously looking at the website, but speaking with other families, it seems like that's where you're going to get a lot of information that you will not get by just looking at the website or showing up on campus.
Exactly.
Are there particular things to look for to ensure that, and obviously there are no assurances, but to increase the likelihood that your child is going to have a positive and inclusive experience on a particular campus at a particular school?
Show up.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just drop your child off in the carpool lane. Schools reach out consistently, both public and private, consistently for parent participation, for parent education, opportunities to come in and learn and connect with other people in the community, for any performances or sporting events. Every opportunity that you can accommodate. We know people are working and doing the best we can day to day, but any opportunity that you can show up in your child's learning environment, you must, so that you are connected to your child, your student, some of the adults in their daily academic lives, peer parents and guardians, and hell, if other people from other schools as you are navigating performances and sporting events, everything. There's a common experience across schools, just as much as there is a common experience within each school community. And so if you can't be connected to any of it if you're not showing up.
Right. Right. And I think that's an important piece as well. You're not just dropping your kid off and, saying good luck. We know that we made the right decision for you. You really have to be involved in the process. And that's probably true for any school that they attend.
Any school.
Yes, absolutely. Collette, one of the things you said, and we've talked about, and I know that, the cost of independent schools, private schools, seems out of reach for so many families and is out of reach for many families. But you also mentioned financial aid packages. How do parents investigate that, find out about that? What is your experience with parents, being able to access those resources and financial support?
Sure. So a lot of private schools offer financial aid, which are basically grants for families that are need-based grants for families. You don't pay that money back. The money goes towards tuition and other expenses depending on the school. And in order to explore the possibility, it's a simple start of going to a school's website, going on their admissions page, and there will be some sort of link to information about financial aid. And each school has a process by which they evaluate whether or not a family would benefit from financial aid, which includes submitting budgets and taxes and all kinds of financial information so that they get a full picture in order to be able to offer these awards at the end of the day. So it is another due diligence. You got to get in there. You got to go to the website, admissions page, financial aid page, and understand what is the process and what is the timeline. Equally important, you don't want to miss deadlines when it comes to submitting that. But most schools also, as part of the admissions process, will offer to their families meetings about financial aid and what does it mean for their school, what does it cover at their school, and the process by which to apply for it. So you're not in a silo when it comes to that, like, hey, figure it out yourself. There's plenty of support. Most schools have a financial aid officer that oversees the process. And that is someone whom you can reach out to directly with questions. But again, I say always do your due diligence first, because in this process specifically and in life in general, it is particularly annoying when the information is readily available and someone reaches out to ask you without having done their due diligence.
Right. And again, it sounds like due diligence is the bottom of everything that you're doing when you're exploring options and making decisions on whether or not this is the right school for you, not only for your child, but for your family, because your whole family is going to be involved, and making sure, again, that you can afford to send your child there, because there are a number of different things that are involved outside of tuition. There's field trips and there's other activities that you might have to pay for. And so parents need to be aware of whether or not they have the resources and whether support is available for them to afford all of those fees that are involved. I've worked with families who have sent their kids to independent schools, and their kids have gotten financial aid. And there's some concern by some families about their kids interacting with other kids who have a lot of resources at their disposal. And then you have kids who are on financial aid. It may not have the same level of resources in their family or in their communities. And they have a hard time navigating things like birthday parties and, trips that their peers might go on that they may not be able to go on. How do you help families navigate those experiences, those day-to-day experiences of kids attending these schools?
Well, first, I normalize that this is life, right? There's not equal footing financially in life. And so if we're trying to make generational change with regard to socioeconomics, we're going to have to endure sometimes some discomfort. And let me say this first. If a school is doing what it's supposed to be doing, then there should be no way to know which students are on financial aid, right? When we're sitting in a classroom, there should be no way to decipher who is on financial aid. I am a proponent of the fact that financial aid should be handled at a level at each school to where a student doesn't need to know that they are on financial aid if their family does not wish to share that information with them. Now, that being said, your point of look to your left, look to your right, come to my home for a birthday party and the home is a full city block size kind of thing, I think that exists in private schools. I think it is a myth that it is so exorbitant and it comes into play often. It does not. A lot of the stuff or the moments where it might come into play are things that are optional. A birthday party, a parent party, etc. And to also be clear, my experience was, and my children's experience is, that at the end of the day, we're all human. So it's not like you show up to someone's house and it's huge and they're like, raw, 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 look at what we have and you don't.
Right.
It's kind of like, welcome to our home. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Not anything that is meant to cause embarrassment or feeling less than, etc. You wouldn't be invited to the birthday party if there wasn't some type of connection behind it, right? So yes, there are socioeconomic differences. Yes, you can tell in certain ways, sure. My experience has been that no one's in these environments to be holier than thou or to highlight said socioeconomic differences, right? And so I think that more often than not, it's really important to be in your own head and in your own emotions and deal with whatever this is for you and clear that out while navigating different experiences, different exposures in private schools.
Absolutely. And then to your point about normalizing this experience, because the experience that a student might have in a private school mirrors the experience that many adults have in work environments and in the real world.
In the real world, there are many people in the real world of whom I'm envious for their socioeconomic status. That's life. And so I get up and go to work every day because I love what I do and because I have to do something, right? And so what folks need to prioritize is gratitude and, wow, look at this environment. What am I getting out of it? What's my student getting out of it? The sky's the limit coming out of this institution, as opposed to, oh, am I good enough? I don't have what this person has. I'm uncomfortable that I don't have this or can't do this. Focus on the bigger picture and gratitude and opportunity.
And the work that you do, Collette, is so important in terms of just letting families know that this is an opportunity that is available to them and helping them to access this resource. What inspired you to dedicate your career to education and supporting families in this way? I kind of know, but I want my listeners to know.
I love it. I joke with folks that I was literally born into schools. My mom was the head of school of the same school in Los Angeles for 44 years before she retired. I was born into privilege. I am a child of privilege. And I had the most phenomenal educational experience based on the adults who were in my educational environment, who connected me to my learning in ways that have carried me through a lifetime of experiences. And so I feel very deeply in my soul that if, as a child of privilege, I got to experience what I got to experience, and it has still to this day such profound impact on my life, that everyone, no matter race, socioeconomic status, family status, all of that, should be able to access learning environments filled with joyful adults who can connect them to their learning in a way that will carry them through a lifetime of amazing experiences. And so that is why I do what I do joyfully. I'm one of the few people in the world that gets to do what they love all day, every day. And the hope is that it affects change. And the one thing that I will say about tying in all the questions that we have talked about thus far is here's the really important thing to consider. No matter what you are bringing to the table in a learning environment, diversity within a learning environment leads to better outcomes for all learners. So whether you are bringing socioeconomic diversity, racial diversity, neurodiversity, family structure diversity, whatever it is, you are bringing a gift to a community and making it better for it. And that's the important thing to focus on as you navigate learning environments.
I feel like we need to put that on a billboard because it's so important. And we know that that's not only true for learning environments, it's true for work environments. And that can be a podcast on its own. But that is such an important piece that you are bringing a gift to this learning environment.
And that is my phrase. You are the gift. And if you can navigate your learning with that mantra in your head, with that mantra in your family or support system, then that changes, again, the perspective and allows you the freedom to take in all that you are being given in these learning environments.
Tell us about private school access.
So Private School Access, again, AXIS, is a nonprofit that I started to help families of color learn about, apply to, and thrive in independent schools in the LA area. So, as I shared before, I believe that access is important to our private schools. And as an educational consultant, I had a crisis of conscience and felt that the work that I do in my consulting firm should also be done for families of color at no cost. So I went to work for a local access organization, and they're doing amazing work with a wonderful mission. I just thought that the model needed a revamp. Most access organizations help families with that admissions piece. And then they drop people off on the front door of the school and they're like, good luck. So I wanted to build a model that is cutting edge because we do a white glove handheld service of helping people through the admissions. But then we stay with our families for the duration of their education. That allows us to answer questions, to help them craft communications, to show up to meetings, to help them advocate optimally for their students' needs. We are also cutting edge because we put equal time into our schools. We work with 35 partner schools as we do our families. We launched just now a first of its kind diversity, equity, inclusion, and accountability accreditation process for our schools. And that allows them to reflect and do a self-study on their commitments to policies, practices, procedures around DEI. We have a team that goes and visits and assesses if what they're doing is actually what's happening. And then we have a board that confers accreditation. The unique part is that regardless of the outcome, we as an organization work with each institution to create goals coming out of the accreditation, and we work with them and stay with them to plan for and execute those goals. And lastly, we place educators of color in our schools. And just like our families, we stay with them upon placement to help them thrive as educators of color in these environments. Because we need healthy, happy adults of color in our learning environments. For that very reason I shared before, the more diversity amongst any learning environment or life environment, as you pointed out, the better the learning outcomes, the better the work outcomes. So we do all of this as an organization because it's full picture, right? It's 360.
Yeah, the work you do is so broad reaching. And I just wanted to reflect on that. I mean, you're working with the schools who support our children. You're working to ensure that that they have educators that look like the children that they're serving. And then you're also helping families navigate this journey from admission to also being in this school environment until graduation. So it's just so wonderful the work that you do. And I'm wondering, for parents who are listening and are thinking,
Yes.
I thought this was out of reach for my child, for my family.
Sure.
What advice do you give parents for exploring this option? Where do they start?
You start with self-reflection, as with anything, and you sit down and you dream big, and you process what it is that you are currently experiencing and what is good about that experience and what you wish was different. And then you take that list and you start to formulate your list of must-haves for your child's learning environment.
Mm-hmm.
And then here comes that due diligence.
Right.
Then you start to research. Do you want to work with an access organization? Which access organizations are available in your area? Do you qualify for access organizations? If you don't qualify for access organizations, do you want to work with a consultant? There is a full range of consultants out there that go from reasonable to absolutely astronomical pricing, right? And you got to find your people if you want someone with insight to hold your hand through the process. It is a very intricate, it is a very committed process to explore and apply to private schools. So any support that you can garner, be it through access organizations or should you choose to do so consultants, is helpful. If neither are an option, then get on the grind, do your research. If you go to different access organizations' websites, they list schools that they work with. Start there. Those are schools that you can then click on from their websites and start to research. Even if you're not working with the organization, there are so many resources out there. As I say to my kids on the daily, a closed mouth does not get fed. So you got to get out there, do your research, and start connecting with folks and asking your questions. Reach out to organizations. Do I qualify? Can you help me? If you can't help me, who should I be asking next? There's plenty of well-intended human beings working in the field of education. And so ask your questions, state your needs, and work collaboratively with people and organizations to take advantage of what can be a very fruitful, eye-opening, growth-inspiring process.
And it's wonderful that there are people like you who do this work. And I can't thank you enough for being here and for sharing this information with families, because I think it is going to be eye-opening for many. And I know that there are families that are going to want to connect with you, either to connect with your access organization or for consulting. So what is the best way for people to contact you to learn more about the independent school option? I'd love for you to share that information.
Sure. My consulting is Zinn Education Management, and the website is ZinnEd. So that's Z zebra, igloo, Nancy, ed.com. And you can reach me directly there. And also have our access organization for families of color, and that is Private School Access, AXIS.
Wonderful. And I will be sure to put links to both of these resources in the show notes. Collette, thank you again for all that you do. I appreciate you and all the work you're doing.
I appreciate you and your work as well. Thank you so much for having me.
I hope that you have enjoyed this episode. And if you have, please sign up for our newsletter. There you will get insights, strategies, downloads, and event updates designed to support kids and teens just like yours. You'll also get valuable information to nurture your child's potential and well-being, and to equip you with the tools and knowledge needed to help your children thrive. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Diverse Thinking, Different Learning by Child Nexus. For more resources, visit us online at childnexus.com.